Hey guys, welcome back to Art of Craftsmanship. My name is Dustin, and today in the shop we're going to be doing another knife video. And I love little knives. I love little kind of EDC knives and kind of these little outdoor knives that are just fit a perfect little purpose and kind of can fit in your pockets or on your belt. Real small, don't take up a lot of room. And I love the shape of a specific knife that I'm going to be making called the Atom. And the Atom was designed by a really cool knife maker on Instagram. You can follow him at Gallardo_knives. And he kind of came up with this really great little knife design. I love it. And so I took inspiration from that, changed it up a little bit to fit my needs. But we're going to be making a knife with a bone handle. I just thought it'd be really cool to make a bone handle. And recently, if you saw one of my recent videos, I did a mount for a deer skull that I found in the woods when I was out with my daughter. At the same time, I found some leg bones from that same deer. So I'm going to see if we can kind of use these leg bones to cut off and make some scales to do bone handle scales on the knife. I just think it would be really cool. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and trace over my design. I'm going to transfer that tracing over on some 1084 1/8 inch stock that I have, and then we'll get that all cut out and shaped. I have my shape drawn out and I used a marker to go around it. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. I'll grind down all of the blue because the blue is on the outside of my pencil line. And then I'll come back to my original tracing and put it over it and just do finessing up all those edges to make sure it's just the right shape that I like. I think I'm just going to do 2 holes with rivets instead of 3. I normally would do 3 on knives, but because this is a small handle and a small knife, I think it'll be nice. And these will be 1/8 inch brass rod. It's right on. This is a great little tool. If you guys don't have this in your shop, it's a spring-loaded center punch. So you basically push in on the tip, and you reach a certain point, and then you hit a spring inside, and it releases, so you get this kickback, and it puts a little a little hole in your metal. So if you don't have one, it's a great little tool. It's really cheap. You can get them from most hardware stores. I've got a couple of them in the shop. They're just really cool, spring-loaded center punch. I'm going to go ahead and follow up and do maybe a series of 8 or 10 holes in the middle here, just to kind of remove some more material, so that way when I glue the handle on, the glue will be able to go all the way through the handle and touch both sides of the handle scale. So just more material, more area for the glue to grab onto when I'm clamping this on. I'm also going to come back behind each of these holes and I'll put a little chamfer or a countersink on, and that's to make sure that there's no material that's sticking up, because I don't want the metal to push the handles away. And also, again, just giving more area, more divots for that epoxy to sit and glue in, fill in those spaces in between the handle scales. All right, all the holes look good. It's ready for the next step, which would be bevel grinding, but I'm gonna take a break on this for a minute. I'm gonna go ahead and start cutting up those bones and see if I can get nice scale material for this handle. So I'll say one thing, just be glad that you're watching this video and you're not actually cutting bone right now, because if you've ever cut bone before, you know that this stuff smells disgusting when you cut it. It smells like death. So it's a little funky in the shop right now, but yeah, keep on going. I don't think my brother Devin likes the smell. He keeps getting further and further away from me in the shop. I was able to cut and sand 2 pieces off from the matching sides of the leg. And these are literally the only pieces of bone that I could use from the legs that will work for these scales. And unfortunately, this one does have a crack running through it, which is why I have the rest of this bone still attached to it. So other than aesthetically, it's going to add the line down the scale. I don't think it will really be a problem, because what we're going to do now is we're actually going to glue both of these pieces onto the scale material that I'll be using. And that way, by gluing this on, it's going to reinforce this crack. So I won't have to worry about it once it's glued and secured onto that. It will show up in the final handle in the image, but I don't mind. You know, that's the way I found it, and I like these bones specifically. I wanted to use these because these are the ones that I found when I was out on that hike with my daughter. So we'll go ahead and glue these up, and then we'll have enough material for both of our scales. All right, we should be good. We'll go ahead and let these set up overnight, and we'll come back and check them out. All right, I'm really happy with these. They're looking good. Got a lot of glue around, which is fine. It just means that I have really good glue bond. And we can see a little bit of glue coming up through the crack in the bone here, so I know that I have plenty of solid glue all the way through that, so it should be a really solid scale. So we'll go ahead and put these off to the side, and we'll start on our next step. I'm going to start working on my bevels now. I'm going to use a bevel jig. Now, I've been using just a regular piece of angle iron. It kind of rusts occasionally, and I'll flatten it back and forth and wipe it off. And I recently just picked up at a scrapyard a piece of aluminum angle. Same thing, just out of aluminum. I'm gonna go ahead and cut a new one out of this. And the nice thing about a jig like this is that as long as you have a table on your grinder, whether that's a 1x30 or you have a 2x72 or this is a 2x42, as long as you have a table on it, a tool rest that can tilt back, then you can set your table at whatever angle you want. And then all you have to use is just a piece of angle iron, clamp your knife to it, and it works perfectly as a jig for grinding bevels. There's all sorts of different kind of grinding bevel jigs that you can buy, but this one works really well. Again, as long as you have a table that can tilt back, and for this specific grinder, I actually had to drill and tap a new hole. The original hole was a little bit lower and more into the grinder, and it wasn't able to tilt back. So I made just a little bit of custom, drilled and tapped a new hole, so now my table now can move and actually tilt back. So I'll be able to use this really easy. We'll go ahead and cut this off, clean it up, and have a new aluminum angle iron grinding jig. Now I'm setting up my scribe, and I've marked off the edge with some blue Sharpie, and I'm scribing the edge now. I have it right down the middle, but a little bit off. I just eyed it, and what that's going to do is I can scribe it one direction, flip it over, and scribe it the other direction, and that will give me two lines, which should be pretty close together down the center. And then I'll bring my bevels into those on each side, leaving just a little bit. Just working on the second side of my bevels, and I realized that I had brought my first side a little too far over past center, further than I like, and because of that, when I got to the end, the tip was just too thin to work with. So the only way to fix that is really to change the profile. So I'm going to go ahead and take off maybe a 64th of an inch, 32nd of an inch along the very edge all the way, bring it down just a little bit all the way back, which will then give me the ability to bring that bevel back into the middle and center it back up again. I think that did the trick pretty well. So it looks like they're pretty even on both sides now, my bevels. A little bit I'll kind of fix and change up after my heat treat, but this is good for post heat treat grinding. All the main grinding is done now. So we'll go ahead and get the forge running and get this in for heat treat. I'm gonna go ahead and get the knife in the forge now. I'm gonna heat it up to critical temperature and bring it out and let it cool down. I'll do that 3 times for normalizing cycles. And I'll get it back in one last time, heat it back up to critical temperature, bring it out and quench it in canola oil. All right, that's the first normalizing cycle. number 2. And I noticed there was a tiny bit of warp in the spine, and this is pre-heat treat. So while it's still soft, I'm going through my normalizing cycles. I'm gonna go ahead and just bring this over to the vise real quick and see if I can't straighten that out while it's warm. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. Might need a little bit more. All right, that looks pretty good. All right, this is number 3. It's the last normalizing cycle. So right now my knife is heating up. It's actually reached non-magnetic, but I want to keep it there just for a few minutes. So I'm kind of keeping it on the outside of the flame, keeping it the same kind of cherry red, dull orange inside the forge. And I'll keep it at that temperature for a minute or 2. Try not to let it come down below that non-magnetic, which will just help to make a really nice clean grain all the way through. And then we'll get it in for the quench. Spine is nice and straight, which is perfect. The tip is still just a little bit off, but that's just in grinding. So when I'm doing my grinding, my finished grinding, I'll bring that tip back over. We're gonna go ahead and get this upstairs and get it into my oven for tempering. Oh yeah, nice and hard. So next evening, we're back in the shop, and I've run all my tempering cycles on my knife, so I'm ready to do my finished work. Before I go ahead and put on all my PPE, I want to just point out that I am wearing the 2019 Art of Craftsmanship logo shirt. And if you're interested in picking one up, head over to Teespring. They're normally 20 bucks, but right now they're on sale for $15 because we're only going to have it up for a limited amount of time. Just for about another month or so, in about January, we're going to be taking these down. So until then, they'll be on sale for $15. So if you head over there and pick one up now, it'd be great. If you're watching this video in the future, head over now. You'll be able to see the 2020 logo, or wherever you are watching in the future. Pick one up there as well. Just a great way to support the channel. I'm putting an 80 grit belt now to start with, and then I'm going to go to a 150 and a 320. Now, I may decide at that point to go up to a high grit, but usually 320 is about good for just kind of an everyday outdoor use knife. I'm going to go ahead and file in a choil now, and that's just the transition between the blade and the ricasso. I'm going to put a choil. It's a little groove, a circular cutout right there, and that'll just help to, when you're sharpening the blade, you don't have to worry about sharpening all the way up to the plunge lines. You can sharpen up to the choil. Just adds a nice little detail to it as well. balance of aesthetics and use are just what makes knife making and blade making really fun. Now that I have the whole blade finished into pretty much its final state, I'm going to go ahead and tape it up to protect it, because we're going to move on to preparing the handle scales. Now I glued the bone onto both of these liner pieces of material, and they're held on really nicely. I'm happy with that. So I'm going to go ahead and trim them off a little bit just to get a little closer to the bone. I'm going to trim the ends as well, nice and even, so that way I can line them up. And then that way I can line up my fronts and get these even where the transition from the handle into the blade is. So I'm going to go ahead and grind down to that, and then I'll put the other one on it and we'll match both of them so they're pretty close before we drill the holes, and then I'll do the finish on the ricasso before I glue it up. You got them putting a nice strong clamp on either end right where the rivets are. This will be good for the front, so we'll clamp all the way up. I'll do one more. I think I just have room for one more small spring clamp on the back. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and clean up now the squeeze out on the front with some mineral spirits, and then we'll let it set up. Looks like everything glued up really well, so we'll go ahead and cut out the profile of the handle first, get all the way down to clean steel around the edges, and then we'll start shaping the handle. I have my main profile done now, so I'm gonna do a little bit more grinding on the ends to make this a little thinner, the end of the handle a little thinner, as well as the top of the handle, thin these down just a little bit, and that'll also clean up my brass rivets a little bit, and then we'll finish off the handle with all hand sanding. This is 100 grit sandpaper, so I'm going to start off with this, just doing the general shaping, and then I'll move to finer and finer sandpaper. I'm moving back to 500 grit, and I just want to do it so I can do it on the spine of the actual blade. I want the blade and the tang to be the same, sanded to the same fineness. So I'm just backtracking to 500, going just overlapping a little bit into the tang and the handle, and then I'll work back up to 1000 grit, so that way the whole tang all the way around is 1000 grit. It's all finished up now, and ready for final sharpening. So I'm going to use my 1x30 grinder with a old 120 grit belt on it. So this is probably closer to about a 300 or 400 grit right now. I'm just going to use that to put a real small micro bevel right on the edge, and then I use my stropping belt to do the final sharpening. Go ahead and do a sharpness test with a paper cut. All right guys, well this turned out really nice. I'm super happy with it. I love that I was able to use this bone, this leg bone from the white-tailed deer that I found when I was out with my daughter. And this is actually going to be a Christmas present for her. It's kind of small because I knew specifically it was going to be a little belt knife for her for when we go backpacking and camping. And I know that she loves white-tailed deer, so she's going to be really excited about this. So it was a fun little project, really nice to be able to use the bone and the liner together with the brass rivets, and just feels nice and looks beautiful. So I'm really happy with it. I hope you guys liked watching. If you did, make sure you give us that thumbs up and subscribe. Check us out on Instagram and Patreon, and we'll see you all in the next video.